We've successfully made contact with my broadcast partner, Eric Wood, who we bring in now, as we do every Monday after Bills games, for his thoughts on the 3-point win over the Dolphins. And, Eric, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about yards after the catch. I'll give Steve Palazzolo some credit here from Pro Football Focus. He outlined the percentage of yards after the catch for Josh Allen the last 3 years. 40% in 2021, 38% in 2022, 46% in 2023. This year it is up to 59% of his throws yards after catch. 59% of his yards coming after the catch this season. We saw more of it yesterday, most notably with the Ray Davis touchdown. Would you call it, I guess the question here is, would you call it a philosophical shift in how the passing game is executed with those numbers?
Yeah, I would say part of it's scheme and then some of it's personnel. And so Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, maybe not quite as good as a Khalil Shakir after the catch. We're seeing Shakir get the most targets this year. Dalton Kincaid shown some great run after catch ability this year. And then obviously James Cook, Ray Davis, the running backs at times have made big plays. But you also look at the philosophical change this year where there's some shorter routes being thrown. There's more of the screen game on the outside, those tunnel screens on the outside of the receivers, a lot more swing passes, and then some of it's Josh. It's Josh taking those checkdowns, not taking those, trying to make the big play down the field all the time. Well, a lot of times when you're thrown across the middle of the field, that 18 to 20-yard window that Josh has loved to hit, and he's been so great at it. Well, a lot of times that comes with a hit from the safety right afterwards, as opposed to swinging it out to your back, giving them some space and allowing them to run after the catch.
How do you think and I agree too, some of it's personnel, some of it's scheme, but it's also, Joe Brady building an offense around what guys are good at. And certainly Shakir has shown himself to be, I think he's an elite run after catch guy. He's impossible to knock off his feet. His contact balance is elite. And he's used it to his advantage. Yesterday, there was a couple of times where it looked like he was down, and he just kept his feet and kept his balance and kept grinding out yards. I think building this around the people that they've got in the building, like Kincaid and Shakir most notably, is really as big a factor. And I think that's the creative part of being offensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. A great offensive coordinator isn't necessarily married to whatever they want to do each and every season. It's, okay, where's my talent? And sometimes you bring the talent into a system to fit the scheme. Other times you're a Joe Brady and you take over midseason last year and your quarterback said a lot of your talent and personnel is already there. And so you're thinking to yourself, how do I maximize these guys? And you're exactly right. Khalil Shakir is elite after the catch. I mean, his balance and strength, the way he's able to make guys miss. He had 4 forced missed tackles on one catch yesterday. And me and Chris were talking about how Ray Davis can often make a mundane run look great in the end and pick up 12 yards when you don't expect it. We were talking about yesterday on the broadcast how Devon Achane can take a swing pass that you think is bottled up and it goes for 15 because of his world-class speed. Well, Khalil Shakir, in the same mold, can take a routine pass and turn it into 11 to 15 yards simply by how shifty he is after the catch. He's been remarkable this year. Josh yesterday, 6 for 7, throwing him the football. I mean, their catch percentage rate, the highest in the NFL last year, and I don't think anybody's even going to come close to it this year.
Yeah. And then, people still comment at the end. I know they didn't play an airtight game yesterday by any means. The defense had some deficiencies, particularly in terms of setting the edge in the run front. That was a little more leaky than we're used to seeing. So the perfect game, maybe outside of week 3 against Jacksonville, they've really been few and far between, but they're still winning games. So what does that signify to you, that even when they're not at their best in all 3 phases, they're still finding ways to put up W's?
Yeah, to me, you're sitting at 7-2 on the season, and you're thinking to yourself that we have a lot of room to grow here. This is a young roster. They've turned over so many different positions with starters on this team. It's not the same team that we had throughout this run prior to this season, where it's an aging roster and you're wondering, can we get through the season healthy? And you kind of know what you got. This is a team that's got so much youth on it that you expect them to grow throughout the season. So when you sit here at 7-2, you're encouraged. You're not thinking, oh man, I wish we could put together the perfect game and, we need to be beating teams by more. You're sitting here thinking to yourself, wow, we have a lot of room to grow here because of the amount of youth that's playing on this roster.
And what do you make of Keon Coleman's game yesterday? It's I don't want to say it's a regression, but it's kind of where he started off, where it's great plays, poor play, good stretch, bad stretch. I thought one of the tough play was the one that Josh put a little too much pepper on the slant route that turned into the interception. That was a hard thrown ball, and it was only about a 15-foot pass. What are your thoughts on Keon, where he's at now? I know we do a week-to-week assessment of how his growth is going.
Well, I'm glad that you said that. Being a former receiver, to me, I didn't make that point in the moment that maybe Josh put too much steam on that ball, and that might be why it went through his hands. And, everyone in the stadium and us in the booth, we're blaming Keon Coleman. And, maybe they're both a little bit at fault because Josh put all that heat on the ball. And as we get to see the replay here on One Bills Live, I mean, it was probably 8 feet away from him when he hits him there. And so, obviously that's a play that Keon wants back. That's a turning point in the game. Turnovers in the red zone are just absolute no-nos in the NFL. You just cannot have them. Those are game-changing swings, and we saw it. Instead of the Bills having a walk-in touchdown and 7 points, Miami goes 93 yards down the field, 97 yards down the field for a touchdown drive and take a 10-3 lead. That's a huge swing in the game. And then at the end, Keon unable to come down with the football, but Jordan Porter takes his head off, and that extended that Bills' final drive. But to me, what that signifies is we've seen it come up the last few weeks. When it's crunch time, Josh has a lot of confidence in going to Keon Coleman, similar to how he did at the end of the game yesterday.
And then as far as the defensive side of the ball is concerned, Tua probably had his most efficient game ever against the Bills. I mean, over 89% completion rate, no turnovers for him, and he didn't even get touched a whole lot because the ball was out of his hands so fast. And the Bills really had a problem slowing them down, particularly in the second half, both run game and pass. I didn't think they could be efficient enough to dink and dunk it all the way down the field with the support of the run game, but they proved me wrong yesterday. Do you think that other teams will try to mimic that, knowing it got the Dolphins to 27 points yesterday?
Yeah, I certainly think so. And the Dolphins use a similar recipe that we've seen teams use against the Bills this year. Stick with the run game, use hard play action, try and attack that second level of the defense. The Bills run a lot of zones, so you know where those guys are going to be and who's going to be in coverage, and they were able to attack Dorian Williams yesterday at times. And, kind of just right beyond that linebacker level was the weakest part against the pass yesterday. And give the Dolphins credit. I mean, Tua goes 25 for 28. If you're going to dink and dunk and have those long sustained drives and be able to do what they did yesterday, you have to be efficient. You can't have a lot of penalties. You can't have big mistakes. And, everyone gave the Bills so much credit in week 2 and saying, okay, maybe they figured out the Mike McDaniel offense. Make them run the football. They're not going to stay consistent with it. And at some point, they're going to take the shots down the field. And that's when you can force them into mistakes. You see the turnovers happen. Well, yesterday they were able to stay ahead of the chain so much, not really put themselves in obvious pass situations, and they were able to stay efficient throughout the game.
What do you make of the comments at the end of the game? Taron Johnson said it's kind of where we wanted this game to go. They kind of invited through their defensive alignment the Dolphins to hand that ball off and shorten the game. Both teams had 8 possessions. Bills scored on 6 of theirs, Dolphins on 5. And that was the difference in the game. And the Bills were perfectly willing, and I thought it was pretty good by them, even though they were down 10-6 at half, to say, no, this is exactly where we were going to be. And they knew a couple of touchdowns got called back on bad holding penalties. They had the call on Taylor Rapp that extended the Miami drive to give them 3 points. All that stuff had happened in the first half. They're still only down by 4, and it's like, oh, no. We're right where we want to be. Take the ball out of Tyreek and Jalen's hands and have Tua hand it to Mostert and Achane. So what do you think about that strategy? And obviously it worked yesterday, but their margin of error seemed big enough to overcome all of that and still win the game.
Yeah, that bend but don't break mentality is great if you can, one, play with a lead. So at some point you get to tee off on them, or two, you can force them into some mistakes. Now, Taron Johnson made an unbelievable play on the first half of the second, on the first possession of the second half where he punched the ball out of Mostert's hand. So it forces the one turnover of the game, which led to 6 points for the Bills after the missed extra point. But, that bend but break is great if you can either outpace someone like they did yesterday offensively, or if you're waiting, it's that bend, bend, bend. Okay, now you have a penalty. We backed you up. We had a stop on first down. Now we could tee off on the passer. And, I understand Terran's comments. They didn't give up the explosives yesterday. And when you're playing Miami, if you could say, okay, we're not going to give them the explosive plays. We're going to make them be patient throughout the game. You're generally going to feel confident about it. Now, Miami just executed at an incredible rate. I mean, 25 of 28 passing is absurd in this league, and give Tua some credit there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conference look, Eric, because we're getting to that time of the year where we start to take a peek at that kind of stuff, and Buffalo, with their 4-game winning streak, has vaulted themselves into the number 2 slot in the AFC conference standings, just behind undefeated Kansas City at 7-0, and they play tonight, as we know. Pittsburgh right behind them at 6-2. And then Houston at 6-3, along with Baltimore, who has been rattling people with their point production. How do you kind of look at this stage of the race? I mean, the Bills are obviously in a good spot. A lot of people would say they have a favorable matchup for a very winnable game this week in Indy, but then the toughest part of their schedule comes up. Do you think they've given themselves the requisite margin for error with this 9-game stretch here?
Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, if you would have started the season and said we could lock in 7-2, most of us would have taken that at this point of the season. Now, Kansas City has, I believe, all won single-score games. Patrick Mahomes, if you would have told me that through 7 games of the season he would have more interceptions than touchdowns, I would have not have predicted them having a 7-0 record. But that's where they stand. First and foremost, you want to win your division. Bills are they have a strong clasp on the division right now. As we got to see that graphic, I did get the willies for a second because of the in the hunt section on the right-hand side. That was essentially the definition of my career. But no, the Bills have set themselves up in a great spot at this point of the season, not losing any games in the division. Of course, you lose the 2 games in the conference, but the Bills are in a great spot right now.
Yeah, and as you see this take shape, I mean, the Bills – it's getting further and further point where the Bills are really the only team with a shot at getting the 1 seed out of the hands of Kansas City. With even Houston, they've got 3 losses. They'd have, that's a lot to ask of things going south in Kansas City. The Bills at least play the Chiefs and can get one of those back right away. When do you start thinking about seeds, or if you're not going to get the 1 seed, if you get to that point, how early do you start to say, okay, let's get all lined up and get ready for the playoffs, because let's get all healthy. Let's hold. If a guy needs to be held out, let him hold out. We don't, how much do you get wrapped up in the 2, 3, and 4 seed rather than if you're out of the 1 seed?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you'd want to have that home field advantage up into the AFC Championship if you're not going to get the 1 seed over Kansas City, but if it comes to be week 15, 16, 17, 18, where you're thinking, okay, if I give this guy some time off now, we might be able to have him healthier in a better spot come playoff time, I think you're making those decisions. And as bad as the division is, if the Jets can't get hot here coming up, then, I mean, the Bills are going to have to make some decisions that they really haven't had to make in a really long time of, how do we handle this final stretch of the season? Do we go after the 1 seed and, full press, balls to the wall? Do we go that way, or do we dial it back some and say we're going to go into the playoffs as healthy as possible and maybe do some load management? It's looking to be an interesting stretch for that final late December, early January, where if these teams in our division can't start stacking wins, the Bills are going to run away with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Last one as far as the game's concerned. Mike McDaniel decides to just kick the extra point, tie the game with about 2 minutes left, a little bit less, and instead, knowing full well there's a good chance he may not get the ball back, instead of going for 2 and maybe a 1-point lead there, they say you don't want to chase points earlier in the game. This is late in the game. and he decides not to go for 2 there. Level of surprise with that decision?
I was expecting him to be aggressive. You're on the road. You're a 6.5 point underdog. To me, you've given up 3 touchdown drives in a row prior to that final possession for the Bills. I'm likely going for 2 there and just saying we probably can't stop them anyways. If this goes to overtime and Bills get the football, they're probably going to score again. That's the way it's shaping out. And look, the Dolphins have so many injuries on the defense side of the football that, it was surprising early on that they were able to get some stops and cause some havoc in the backfield for Josh and the offense. And so I likely would have gone for 2 there, just thinking I'm going to stay aggressive. At this point of the season, we only have 2 wins. Let's not hold anything back, but they went for the extra point. Obviously, they tied that game up. And, if Jordan Poyer doesn't have a unnecessary roughness,
they do.
We might be having a different conversation then.
Yeah, they do stop him. Actually, they did a really nice job in that last drive. Josh had nothing. They tried to throw it around a little bit, and couldn't make any hay. Finally, he goes deep to Coleman, and you get the gift from Poyer. That, to me, this game is about 2 teams that know each other really well. They've played a ton of matchups. These particular combinations, Mike McDaniel's probably got a good recipe as well. And if he's sitting there and he's got a quarterback that went 25 of 28, went 89% of his passes, no picks, couple of touchdowns. They ran for 150, 149, and can't beat this team. There's got to be some soul searching going on in Miami.
Yeah.
Oh, you're 100% right. And this is a Bills team that has completely had their number, and they know it. I mean, we talked to their radio guys beforehand, and they're enamored with Josh Allen. They get to see his best. Josh said 5 AFC Player of the Week awards against the Dolphins alone in his career. And
I told that to some guys; they couldn't believe it.
Yeah. We're both talking to Joe Rose and that crew, and, but when you look at it, they know that we own them at this point. And, it kind of reminds me of when we would play the Patriots in my career. We would have a great game, and somehow Brady would beat us in the end. And that's essentially what Josh has been doing to the Dolphins over the years.
All right, quickly before we let you go, you got your big annual fundraiser tonight. Why don't you just share the info with everybody here for Flights and Bites?
Yeah, we got Flights and Bites at Resurgence Brewery tonight, benefiting the Evan Wood Fund under Oshai Children's Hospital. So I got to go down and visit with some families this morning that have children at the Children's Hospital, and it was a special morning, and we have an awesome event here tonight at Resurgence Brewery. Going to raise a lot of money for these families.
Yeah, especially for making sure everybody's got a good Christmas as well. So good work there, and we will see you there tonight, Eric. Thank you very much for the time, as always. We'll catch up with you next week.
See you.
Yep, sounds good. Looking forward to seeing you guys. And I love how we have technical difficulties this week, and I'm right down the street in Buffalo. Generally, I'm doing this in Louisville. We don't.
Right. Yeah, better Wi-Fi in Kentucky, apparently. Who knew?
That's right.
Thanks, Eric.
Right.
We'll catch up with you.